All right, everybody, it is Monday, the 18th of August, 2025 at 7 a.m. or thereabouts. And this is Politics by Jake. I am Jake, your political host, your commentator, and student of history. Because as those of you who listen to my show know, I use history as a kind of a predictor. And I think that you've heard me say that history is just as important as quantum physics in its own way, because a lot of these things the rising generation does not know have happened before. Like one of the arguments that I always make, it's not an argument, it's a premise, it's a basis for the show. Unfortunately, I wish we could be talking about other things like simple Democratic and Republican politics and other things like that. But unfortunately, it's incumbent upon me, and my colleagues are doing this too in the alternative media. Basically, the way I'm saying it, regardless of the way they're saying it, is that a fascist cabal has ascended to the levers of power. They've got all three branches. They've got the executive branch. Well, four branches, really, when you think about it. They've got listen to me what I say, my reasoning. They've got the executive branch. They've got the judicial branch with the corrupt Supreme Court that they've got there. Well, you've heard me talk about the show. Guys like Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas, obviously corrupt, tremendously obviously corrupt. And the legislative branch as well, with little man Mike Johnson. Some call him MAGA Man, or some call him MAGA Mike, but he's there controlling things in the House. And the Senate is also controlled by Republicans, too bad. And the Democrats, with the prig factor, the corporate Democrats that you've heard me talk about before, have basically, they're in line with the same master that the Republicans are in, which is what George Carlin used to refer to aptly in his own inimitable style as the financial criminals who run Wall Street. But basically it's oligarchy. And the oligarchs have always wanted you in the United States to think that this was some fight between communism and between capitalism. But really what it is, it's against oligarchy and everybody else. And you have a situation where from the time of about 1933, maybe we want to say 1935 or thereabouts, you have the implementation of something called the New Deal, which was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was the president at that time, 4 terms in the presidency, more than any Republican or Democratic president had ever had, and arguably will ever have again, unless the 2028 elections are suspended by a state of emergency or some other such thing, which would be unprecedented because there was a state of emergency in 1864. And Abraham Lincoln, there were still elections, and Abraham Lincoln was elected. But, anything's possible, and you've heard me say, don't even worry right now about the 2028 elections. Worry about the 2026 elections, because the Republicans know what they're doing. They know, and in fact, it states in Project 2025 that this is a second American Revolution, and that they are entirely, and I'm taking this in so many words, but when you read it, you must needs come to this conclusion that they are entirely willing to shed blood, to shed your blood. And what's the criteria? If you oppose it. Hey, if you don't oppose it, we won't shed your blood. If you do oppose it, well, then all bets are off. So this is a movement. It's a revolutionary movement. They have basically stated, and in essence, what you're talking about here is you're talking because and Project 2025, believe me, it does, you can't really find it anymore. During 2024, you could find it. I think I've got a PDF of it laying around somewhere, but by the time we went to record the show, I didn't have it, and frankly, I haven't looked at it because I've already looked at it. I basically already know what it means and what it says. But now, if you want to get it, it's very hard to get. If someone wants to call in on the show and give a link or a URL where we can locate it for free. Otherwise, you have to get it from the Heritage Foundation, which masquerades as a conservative organization, but actually is the basis for this, with Kevin Roberts, who's basically the person who wrote this up, plus a couple of other guys, and you have to pay like $125 for it. So send $125 to the Heritage Foundation, and they'll send you a book that outlines it and explains how they're going to revolt against the existing United States government. Boy, that's nice work if you could get it. Pay me $125 and I'll show you how I'm going to revolt against the United States government. That's good. That's a good deal right there, boy. But that's what it is. But basically, that's what it says. And really, that really is what it is. So as I talked about last week, it's really an intentional document. And I likened it in, not last week's show, but last Friday's show, to Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf, which is written by Adolf Hitler, and My Struggles. And the interesting thing about Mein Kampf is that the title is shortened. Mein Kampf, My Struggles. It wasn't that. It was comically, absurdly long titles. It was, I'm not giving you the exact title that it was, but it was, honestly, it was just about like this. It was My Struggles Against Stupidity, Idiocy, Morons, Lummoxes, Chuckleheads, Chowderheads, Douchebags. It was just all like that. I mean, the literal title was literally like that. And the publisher looked at that and went, ooh, that's not going to work. True story. And so they shortened it to Mein Kampf, Mein Struggles, and that was it. But it's an intentional document. And it tells you everything that Hitler is going to do. All you have to do is read it. Back in the 1920s when it was published, he tells everything. And that's what Project 2025 does. It tells you everything, and it behooves us to take it seriously. And, of course, combined with this, you have what is essentially a kakistocracy. I've initiated, and I've actually done one episode, what I call the Kakistocracy Corner. And as I said when I did that, kakistocracy is basically a government by the worst and the most unqualified people. And I talked about RFK Jr., for example, in the first Kakistocracy Corner, who has taken the mRNA COVID shot, which was a miracle. The COVID vaccine, which is mRNA, is nothing but a miracle. There's no way to describe it. It saved millions upon millions of people. And he's basically taken away $500 million of funding for it. And he's going after the companies that created it. And it's all a bunch of nonsense. The vaccine worked. This is a man who's a drug addict, a self-admitted drug addict. He says he's reformed and that he doesn't do it anymore. But he did do it. And he did, I believe it was heroin and cocaine. And he has found a group of people who follow him. It's the anti-vaccination crowd. And people do not realize that this is a person who, for example, in Tonga, he went to Tonga and he talked to them about, and pardon me, it's Samoa, it's not Tonga. And basically what you have, and this is from an article on February 3rd, 2025, just, to give you the background on it. Chair of the World Health Organization Advisory Group is urging world leaders to denounce misinformation about health. And it says Sir Colin Tungwitonga, that's why I said Tonga, is reacting to comments made by U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy, who claimed that measles were not the cause of 83 deaths in Samoa during the measles outbreak there in 2019. And Samoa's head of health, Dr. Alec Ekaroma, rejected Kennedy's claim, calling it a complete lie. Sir Colin said leaders have a duty to protect people from inaccurate public health statements. He said he was absolutely horrified that the person who is the most influential individual in the United States health system could lie and keep a straight face. But he said he's not surprised because Kennedy has a history of subscribing to fringe, incorrect knowledge, conspiracy theories, and odd things of that type. He said that Dr. Ekaroma was very clear and direct in his condemnation of the lies from Kennedy and the group. He said Kennedy's comments and attitudes towards vaccination will feed anti-vaxxers, and it will. and discourage parents who might be uncertain about vaccines. So it is potentially, and it will, going to have a negative impact on immunization programs the world over. And the United States has a significant influence, indispensable nation, just like you've heard me say before, on global health policy. So these kinds of proclamations and attitudes and ideologies are going to have disastrous consequences. And I could go on, but basically what he did is he went around preaching to the people of Samoa that they didn't need a vaccine, and there was a measles outbreak as a consequence of it because the disease is around. Some diseases have arguably been eradicated, but you have to understand what the word eradicate means. It means they're eradicated because the vaccine worked. And in the case of smallpox, for example, which goes way back to the early 19th century, when they started doing vaccinations on smallpox, it's been eradicated because of the great prevalence of the vaccine that kept the disease down. If you did not have that, the disease would come back, and this is what it's referring to with the measles. And so Kennedy was over there, and he was talking to the people about that, and he persuaded some credulous people who look at vaccines and just can be credulous people or people who are easily persuaded. They're easily misled. And unfortunately, that happens. We have a group of people who are like that in the country and in the world, and that's just, the way it is. And I don't by any means pronounce this as a pejorative or a judgment or a mean claim against those people. There's just people are just people. There are some who can be persuaded. Abraham Lincoln himself said that you can fool, some of the people some of the time and some of the people all the time and something like that. It's just the way it is. People have different attitudes, and they are susceptible to certain persuasive arguments. But in this case, this is completely incredible and unbelievable because vaccines are most evidently safe, and there is most evidently a process which has been developed ever since the 19th century in order to make these things sure and to make sure that these things work. And they do work, and they've saved millions of lives. Like I've said, 300 million lives saved, unquestionably, just from smallpox alone. And the mRNA is an absolute miracle. It's a miracle of modern technology, and it's being cut off by a kakistocratic person, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., really doesn't know what he's talking about, but has found a voice and unfortunately has found a part of the community that will pay attention to him. And I'm sorry to say it. And it will have great consequences for us all because the other shoe has yet to drop on this whole vaccination thing. We've got the bird flu issue coming up. It's going to cause great problems. The withdrawal of the United States from the World Health Organization, which provides about 20% of the budget. And let me not get ahead of myself, but I feel to say at this moment that the reason why that's being done is so that Donald Trump can pay tax breaks and gifts to the people who paid him hundreds of millions of dollars, and in the aggregate, probably billions, in order to elect him. That is why they elected him. And he loves to do it. He doesn't care about you. The oligarchs don't care about you. They are entirely willing that you should die and that you should suffer and be miserable so that they can have money. And this is why you've heard me say that we can't really say we have to cap earnings. You can't have more than $1 million, or you can't have more than $10 million, or you can't have more than 100 million or $1 billion. But we also have to countenance the fact that such people who have this kind of zeal, Jeff Bezos is one of them, but merely one, you have to give space, at least in your mind, whether you choose to believe it or not, whether you choose to make it a premise, whether you choose to make it a hypothesis or not, that there's some kind of sickness for a person who has more money than he can spend in a lifetime and yet feels the need to make it. Donald Trump is one of these sick people, and I make no bones about it. He himself said, and he was not, and they're not ashamed to say it. They're not afraid to say it, which kind of lends itself to the premise that there maybe is something wrong with people like this. He said when he was campaigning for the presidency the first time, and he was making these grabbing motions on the podium, and he said, all my life, all I wanted to do was to get as much as I could get. And he made these continually grabbing motions. And I'm like, really, Donald? All your life? Like from the time you were 5 years old and you had your core wound in your psyche when you realized that you weren't loved by your father, and you have come to realize that probably nobody loves you and that the only way you can get things is through money. And so it was such a core injury and such a core psychic wound that maybe the only way you could stifle and put off the terrible hurt and the terrible pain that you felt was to go and grab everything that you could get all the time? Well, could be. And we're at about a break point, so let's take a break here, and we'll be back. And this is Politics by Jake, and we're going to talk about the so-called summit. I'm going to have a few remarks about that, and we'll be back. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Are you tired of the noise and the spin? Do you want the real story behind the headlines? I'm Jake, and this is Politics by Jake, where I tell you what they won't. And now, we're going even deeper, and I need your help to keep doing it. Join me on Patreon and support independent political analysis that doesn't pull punches. You'll get insider breakdowns, you'll get bonus clips, and first access to new content. So go to patreon.com/politics by Jake. That's patreon.com/politics by Jake. No filters, no fluff, just the truth. Let's do this together. Okay, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And, really, we're in kind of a dismaying situation. You could argue that we're kind of at the nadir of world geopolitical development, because basically we've got three leaders in the world. I don't count little Kim Jong-il rocket man. We have Trump and we have Putin, VV Putin, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, and we have Xi, the Emperor of China. And, frankly, the idea that you have the two maximum potentates of the world, I guess, and I guess I included Xi of China, this is appalling. It shows that the world historical process about which we are concerned and about which we talk on this show of things that you can do, and things are happening, and things are happening in a great way. But the fact that this is the state of things it's appalling. It shows that the world historical process is essentially at rock bottom. This is bottom of the barrel in terms of intellect, in terms of morality, in terms of capability, and in terms of humanity. But this is the world we've got. This is the world we've got. This isn't the happy one we'd like to have, but this is the one we've got to deal with now. So with that said, let's make some comments about this. And you may, as listeners to my show, may think, well, okay, Jake's going to be laconic now. Jake's going to be cynical now. Yeah, maybe. But here we go, and let's talk about it. So this summit is basically worthless, and on the last show I said the reason why he's doing it is because of Epstein. Anything to distract, but he wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize, which apparently the Republicans don't have the correct pronunciation of Nobel, Nobel, not Noble. It's not the Nobel Peace Prize. But this is exactly what I said. This is like the nadir. This is like the lowest. in intellect and capabilities. These people are morons. This is kakistocracy at its finest. And okay, so basically, I would say more because there's so much more to say. I was thinking of doing something on Christy Nome, but I don't think I'm going to have time to. That would be a good kakistocracy corner, but we don't have time for that. We've got to talk about other things, but this is the way they are. They're morons. They're ignoramuses. I listed a bunch of things. They're buffoons. They're clowns. They're clown shoes. They are part of the Trump clown car, and they're incompetent, and they're bunglers. And I'm sorry, but this is what they are. And one wonders, and one really thinks that this is the intent of Donald Trump and others like him. I knew a guy, and he was fired from his state job, and subsequent to that, I guess he had a heart attack or something like that, and he survived with the technology that existed in those days, which it was the Audis, so heart technology was okay. They cracked open his chest and he did something, and, he lived for a considerable amount of time after that. But he said to me that all he wanted to do, because he was mad, I'm explaining this to try to give you an explanation and a justification, and for all you maggots out there and all of you others who might say, Jake is just one of these elitists. It's just exactly the problem. Politics by Jake, just another well, it's not. As Bill Clinton said, I feel your pain. I understand you're this way, and I'm using this as an example. So this guy was so embittered that he'd been fired from his state job. He told me that on his way out, he just stole every bit of office supplies that he could. And this was like a really normal guy. This wasn't some renegade. It wasn't some hothead. But he was so twisted and so embittered because a job means everything. That he said to me once, he said, Jake, really what I want to do more than anything? And I said, yeah. And he said, I want to strike a match and light it up and then step back and watch it all burn. So he had been radicalized. Just this completely normal guy. And why? Because his means of livelihood and his career and his sense of self and his sense of his own importance, which we all have. That's just kind of the way the world works. And we're kind of trained to find something that we can be important in and esteemed in, not only for our own good, but for the benefit of others, to help society move along. That's just the way it is. A lot of people will say that's pejorative, or rather that's degraded, and they'll say in a better society wouldn't be that way. I kind of agree with that. I kind of understand that, but that is the way it is. You have competition, people who are willing to be cutthroat rise. Noam Chomsky talked about that. They rise to the top. They're really not the best people, but they're willing to do the things that are necessary in order to get them to the top, and others are not. And if someone falls by the wayside, they can get mad. They can get really mad. And that's the way a lot of you maggots are out there. You think there's some deep state, and I've explained that to you too. Some deep state hiding that's taking everything away from you. And so you've got Doge, or douche, as I call it. You get guys who are maybe not older than teeny boppers going in there because they think the deep state is hiding in there, because they've had their heads filled with a bunch of MAGA crap from listening to Donald Trump or his ilk, to make you think that, and you're participating, you douche people, in the destruction of the economy and the superstructure of the United States, which is a beneficial thing and not a bad thing. And I understand that you're mad. And what Donald Trump has done is he has energized and mobilized that anger. You have fallen out of the middle class. You are the lumpen. You're poor. You wear comparatively rags. That was, lumpen's German. It means rags. Lumpen proletariat. Proletariat is just the working class. It's just working stiff. White collar, blue collar, doesn't matter. You're proletariat. You're a working stiff. When you fall out, you're still the proletariat. That's still what you do. You are selling your labor for money, but now you're poor, so you're rags. So that's basically lumpen proletariat. You're always the proletariat. You're still the same. And I'm here to tell you, you've been sold a bill of goods. You've been sold a lie. And I'm sorry, truly, that you fell out of the middle class. I am sorry. There are many reasons why that can happen. But you've fallen under the sway of a false populist, Donald Trump, and he sold you a bill of goods. Politics by Jake is here to explain it to you and to give you the path to political repentance, because this is no good. It's no good. So, getting back to what we were talking about, we have Trump up at this military base, and you can see why an Air Force base was selected, because it has to be a military base. Because if Putin is a criminal, the international courts are after him. If he shows his face anywhere in the United States, there's going to be a hue and a cry. It's just like the crowd outside the White House in his first administration. They cried out almost as one voice, Republican traitors, Republican traitors. And some of the people in the entourage were shocked because they had never heard them referred to like that before. Because of, Trump's going along with Putin, and really just, it's worse than that. It's more like kowtowing to Putin. And he's a criminal. He's got blood on his hands. So, like I said, if he goes anywhere in the United States, there's going to be a hue and a cry. There's going to be a significant militant demonstration, or there would be, against him, just by ordinary people. And then also by specifically Ukrainian, because Ukrainians live in America, Polish live in America, Baltic states live in America, Romanians, all kinds of people. They all have legitimate beefs and grievances against this bloody tyrant of the Kremlin. So it had to be a military base. That's the only place. That's the only place that Trump can do things these days. I mean, let's face it, he's not exactly. Never mind what Carolyn Levitt says. Carolyn Levitt, did you hear what Trump said about her lately? She of the luscious lips. He just can't help himself, can he? So anyway, he's not exactly a matinee idol himself. He's not exactly loved. Forget about the propaganda spewing out of the Ministry of Propaganda with Carolyn Levitt as the chief propagandist. So the grave danger that hangs over this event, and you can see it happening, I mean, there's talk of him offering a mineral deal to Russia if they'll stop the war. And what is this? This is nothing but appeasement. That is to say, the policy attitude, when we speak of appeasement, which was noted notoriously by the British government's United Kingdom, second half of the 1930s, in the 1940s. They demonstrated this in Europe. They demonstrated it in Asia. You may remember that the British had a policy even before it got to be this question with Hitler. It became the British appeasement of the Japanese Empire that was doing the same thing, that was encroaching on other nations, taking over nations. You had the Japanese attacking the forces of Chiang Kai-shek and the Chinese nationalists on mainland China. There was something called the Burma Road. Later, there was the Lido Road. But the Burma Road was a way to get supplies to Kunming, I guess, in southern China, and this was the lifeline. And it was like the equivalent of the Murmansk Run, taking war equipment to the Soviets on the part of the Allies in the U.S., the British, starting in 1941, 1942. And so, in other words, in the case of the Far East, it was the Burma Road, which the British were, well, they cut it off, or whatever they thought about it, they cut it off. And that meant that the Chinese nationalists of Chiang Kai-shek were hard-pressed, and they stayed hard-pressed. So, basically what Trump will tell you is he'll say, I'm just trying to give peace a chance. I'm just trying to stop the killing. Of course, there's no ceasefire now. He changed his mind on that. Before, he wanted a ceasefire. Now, after meeting with Putin, he says no ceasefire. They should just stop the war as soon as possible. What the heck does that mean? Because what you're doing is you're justifying his aggressive tactics. Now, let's be clear. Putin started this war. Like Hamas in Gaza and Israel, they started this. There is no question but what they started it. And there is no question but what the Russian Federation under Vladimir Putin, because the Russian people are slaves, talked about that before, going all the way back to Rousseau. Rousseau said they were slaves. And he pejoratively said people get the government they deserve. So he said maybe they don't deserve anything other than that. But they are slaves, terrible corruption. suffered at least 1 million casualties. Awful desperation, misery that war brings. Like Sherman said, war is hell. He was the one who said it in 1864. War is hell. He said there's no other way to describe it, and there's no reforming it. The only thing that you can do is, number one, make it as terrible as possible. And number two, end it as soon as you can. Those are the only things. So Trump is saying, let's give peace a chance. He's saying this to someone, and he wants to make a deal with them. And this is why I call it appeasement, because he wants to make a deal with Putin, which will justify the 1 million dead, and Putin doesn't care. He's like Trump. Putin doesn't care about the death and suffering of his own people. They are truly just cannon fodder him. And as far as like the North Koreans are concerned, Untermenschen, subhumans. He cares about them even less. So they're all cannon fodder, and he's entirely willing to have that blood on his hands, and he does have blood on his hands, to commit these war crimes against a sovereign nation, and now go to a weak president, a clown, a buffoon, as we have continually said, and get that person, that tenant of the Oval Office, to give him what he wants. And all this does is justify what he did. All the encroachment, all the treaty violations, all the wounds, all the psychological suffering, all the physical suffering, all the deaths, all the collateral suffering of the families who had their husbands and their lovers and their girlfriends and their boyfriends and their fathers and their mothers and their sons killed or maimed, psychologically scarred and disfigured for life. Hey, this is what he did. And you want to appease that? Is it really plausible? Is this possible that somebody like Putin, a hardened Moscow, the Third Rome fanatic with religious apocalyptic overtones, and at this point, this is a good place to stop. We haven't taken a break for a while. Let's take a break, and we'll come back and we'll pick up right at this point. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Hi, this is Jake with Politics by Jake. Do you like what you hear right now? Support the real talk then. Go to patreon.com/Politics by Jake right now. Every dollar helps fight the noise. And this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And we were talking about Putin. At the end of it, I did a pretty much of a bang-up job in describing him the way he really is. He is a bloody butcher who cares nothing for his own people and is willing to let them suffer through the awful things that I enumerated at the end of the segment, just, before we had the commercials, and we're starting now, in order to get what he wants. Because he knows that if he can foster a spirit of appeasement with a weak man like Donald Trump is, well, he can get territorial gains. And he's totally good with that. He'll do that. And so we talked about him being a Third Rome fanatic. What does that mean? What do you even mean, Jake, when you say something like that? Well, I'll tell you. This is a prophecy, and nobody knows it. And this is why I say Politics by Jake, we tell you the things that other people won't tell you. In this case, I'm not sure whether anybody knows it, But I'll tell you, enough with the cheap politics by Jake 70 on Mondays and Fridays, KCAA. Cheap plug. This is a prophecy about Moscow being the third Rome. That it goes back to the early 1500s. See, the Byzantine Empire, and I hate, it's the Eastern Roman Empire. I say Byzantine because the segueing into the correct statement, which is that it was the Eastern Roman Empire, hasn't totally occurred. Some people still know it as Byzantine, but it was Eastern Romans. It was the Romans. The Roman Empire lasted until 1453 AD. And it was defeated, and there was great concern in the West that who would stand up and be the bulwark against the Ottoman Turks. And indeed, the Ottoman Turks held sway. They held sway until World War I. That is what Lawrence of Arabia is about. I encourage you to watch that film. It's a great film. It's a magnificent spectacle. It's long, very interesting. Some great actors. Peter O'Toole in the role of Lawrence, just really good. You will enjoy it, and you will learn a lot, because it is set at the end of World War I, or thereabouts, with the destruction of the Ottoman Empire. So from 1453 to what? 1918, let's call it. This is just a few decades shy of 500 years. So in retrospect, the West was right to be concerned about this. And they all wondered how the Ottoman Turks would be stopped. Well, there was a monk. His name was Philotheus of Pskov. It's up there in Pskov, it's up there in northern Russia, which basically says, and if you go to Politics by Jake, youtube.com /@politicsbyjake, I actually have videos there in which I talk about it, and I give you the exact quote from the letters. He wrote a series of letters to the person who would become the Tsar of all the Russias in those days. And he said, and this, once again, I'm paraphrasing, but this is what it is. The Roman Empire, he said, Rome on the Tiber, and that's in Italy. The Tiber's a river in Italy. That they have fallen, and that fell in 476 AD. And remember, this is Philotheus talking in, around the early 1500s. The first Rome has fallen, he said. That was 476 AD. The second Rome was already in existence from about, 300, 330, something like that, in Constantinople. And it lasted from 476 AD about another 1,000 years. Not quite, but once again, just like the Ottoman Empire didn't quite last 500 years, but almost. But almost in the 1450s, Constantinople fell to the Turks. And Constantinople was the second Rome. So you have Rome, Tiber, Rome on the Bosporus, because that's where Constantinople is, the Bosporus Straits there. And he said, and this is crazy. I mean, this really is crazy. But he said, and the third one stands, and that would be Moscow. And a fourth there shall not be. And so this prophecy, like I say, series of letters from Philotheus, it indicates that the creation of Moscow equates to the third Rome. And this is funny, because at the time, Moscow was just a bunch of huts. It wasn't much of anything. It's kind of the creation of Moscow, the third Rome, so in other words, is kind of the beginning to the end of world history. And it could be a pretty immediate end to world history and a kind of apocalyptic conclusion to our worldly affairs here, but The point I'm making is this is what they believe. They believe this, and this is embodied in the Greek Orthodox faith and in the Russian Orthodox faith, this idea that Moscow somehow, crazy as it sounds, is the vessel, the sanctified vessel of religious orthodoxy. And the Russian Orthodox Church stands, whereas the Greek Orthodox fell because of heresies. And I'm saying this is the way they look at it. And that Moscow has stood fast and strong against heresies. In particular, the Council of Florence, or I should say Florence, F-L-O-R-E-N-C-E, Florence, from 1438, which Moscow, like I said, they were just a collection of huts on a muddy plain. And Moscow was invited to join the Golden Renaissance of Italy. Renaissance Florence, anybody who's been there, but they wouldn't do it. Because they were barbarians. And when I say they're barbarians, let's be relativistic about it. You've heard me state before that in this show that the Russian people are slaves. And this is a topic in and of itself, which probably demands its own show or its own segment. But I say that they are slaves, and they are slaves. But I've just basically made the claim that Russia largely refused. And using the Council of Florence as an example, or at least remained separate from the Renaissance. But I do want to be careful to frame this to avoid oversimplification. Here's how I would put it accurately and insightfully, and it would be this. Russia did not participate in the Renaissance in the way that Western Europe did, largely due to its geographic, religious, and political isolation. But this is important, and you cannot say that this was incidental. You can say geographically, therefore it was incidental. I don't know. Maybe. Western Europe embraced, and let me explain to you so you understand the consequences of that, because most of us don't think in phases of Western thought, but there were phases of Western thought. There was the Renaissance. Then there was the Enlightenment. Then there was the Age of Reason. What I'm saying is that Russia didn't have any of these, or they were behind. And this has an impact on how they think. And you can't get around it. You just can't get around it. So, in other words, Western Europe embraced humanism. They embraced classical revival. They embraced secular inquiry. Russia remained rooted in what I have said to you is this Orthodox ideology, this Byzantine Eastern Roman Empire tradition, this autocratic rule, which was, what the Eastern Roman Empire was, it was the emperor. And it's just so important that you understand that this divergence, and it was a divergence, and it impacts us today, which is why we talk about history here on Politics by Jake, because this is important. This divergence, or this refusal, or this being behind, it created a cultural gap that would persist for centuries, and it persists and is there today. And there was even a suspicion of Western influence. It's always been that way. Remember, I said the putrid West. I always describe them talking about the West, the putrid West. Of course, they love the schools. They love the money. They love all the vacation spots. They love everything about it. So I don't know who actually believes this putrid West stuff, but it's baked in. The Renaissance humanism, the secular thought, they were viewed as potential threats to the authority of the church and the Tsar. You've heard me talk about the kingdoms of the Arabs. They never had a Renaissance. They never had an age of humanism. They never had an age of reason and an age of enlightenment. This matters. And this is kind of the importance of Philotheus' Third Rome doctrine, because it explicitly rejected Roman Catholic and Protestant influence. And it reinforced Russia's cultural separation. So really, while Europe awakened to humanism, to reason, to enlightenment, to a revival of classical beauty, Russia turned inward. It guarded its Byzantine flame, Eastern Roman, insisting that it was the Third Rome, which they do today, and resisting the very currents that reshaped the West. And in that refusal, it preserved power, but at the cost of transformation. And that is why I say, relativistically speaking, they are barbarians. But you have to understand the context. And now I've explained that to you. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, I'm Jake with Twain Consulting. And if you're a business owner, freelancer, or entrepreneur, protecting what you've worked so hard to build, start with solid agreement. Imagine having agreements that make misunderstandings disappear and costly disputes a thing of the past. Get It in Writing is the all-in-one legal form package designed just for people like you, savvy entrepreneurs who want clear, enforceable contracts, whether you're hiring trusted contractors, leasing space, or closing deals that move your business forward. Get It in Writing provides easy-to-use, professionally drafted forms that save you time, money, and stress. Right now, you can get full access for just $99. That's 80% off the regular $497 price. A limited time opportunity you don't want to miss. Picture the peace of mind you'll have, knowing that your business is fully protected so you can confidently focus on growth and success. Don't wait until the unexpected happens. Take control. Secure your business today with Get It in Writing. Call us now at 213-465-0639 or visit facebook.com/Twain Consulting to get started. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Hi, this is Jake with Politics by Jake to tell you you're not crazy. The system is rigged. Help us say it louder, won't you? Join us at patreon.com/Politics by Jake. And this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. But according to Philotheus, it is that Moscow has stood fast against all that temptation. When they talk about the West, one of the things they say, they use the adjective putrid. The putrid West. It's all the rejection of that. And all of that temptation that they've rejected and have stuck to, and you know, this is just what they believe. I'm just explaining to you what they believe. I'm not asking you to believe it, and I'm not saying that it's true, but it's what they believe. And the West has never heard this. The West does not know this, except for those in the scholarly institutions who study such things. But the general population, they don't know anything about this. And so it's like a rejection of the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed, that's slightly amended, certainly by the church councils in Spain some years after the end of the Rome, was the idea that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and from the Son. Qui ex patria filioque procedet. That's the Latin. That's what that means. The Holy Spirit proceeds, who from the Father and the Son proceeds. Qui ex patria filioque procedet. But Moscow says, no. The Holy Spirit proceeds only from the Father. And this, as I've said, this is the theological translation of the idea that, for example, Stalin, father of his country, right? Holy Spirit proceeds from him. Stalin is always right. That's why he didn't persecute the Serbs too much, because they were supporting him in the idea that he was always right. And that's the political analog to all this, that the Holy Spirit proceeds only from the Father, and that's a heresy according to, Western Christianity, that Eastern Christianity, and there is a split between Western and Eastern Christianity. And what does this mean? Putin is on a mission of world conquest. I know it sounds crazy, but this is true. And I say more in some of my videos on youtube.com/politics by Jake about this. I talk about Eurasianism. I talk about Duganism. We're not going to get into this now because just not enough time. But he believes that this is and they believe that this is the destiny of the human species, to undergo a final phase of Muscovite world domination. And like I said, it doesn't matter what you and I think. This, according to the people, and I just mentioned Duganism, someone like Dugan is sympathetic, at least to this kind of outlook. And of course the patriarchs, Cyril, to name one, and all kinds of people like this in the world have to be checked for how far down the road they would go with Moscow, the Third Rome. In Russian, Moskaya Teoria Triatova Rima, the Third Rome. And that's what he believes. And anybody in the West who's not conversant with that, and I've just told you that most people are not, you have missed out on a central pillar of Russian national ideology, because they all know it. They go to church on Sunday and they're taught it. Here's the problem. If you go to a true believer in Moscow's the Third Rome, which is Putin, and we're coming back around the corner here to where we started, it's not possible to negotiate with a person like that. Because any deal, this vulgar term, I told you Trump wants to give them a mineral deal, this vulgar term that obsesses Trump with his vulgar mentality, any deal is heresy to that I've just described. Any deal, it's an apostasy. It's an apostasy caving into the putrid West, which they consider to be like or tantamount to the devil. So you're turning against your own religion. This is really a thing. I'm telling you, this is really a thing. Politics by Jake, Monday and Friday, 7 a.m. on KCAA. So, I mean, I don't know what you could expect out of such of a summit if it's just by itself, unless it's accompanied by other measures. It's not going to yield, in my opinion, anything good. And honestly, I think that's the minimum we could say about it. And, of course, nothing did come out of it. It was just performative. And one of the reasons that I said it's performative is because of Epstein and the desire for the Republicans that Trump get the Nobel Peace Prize. Nobel, I know. It's the Nobel Peace Prize. I know what it is. But they say it's the Nobel Peace Prize. But, and Trump himself admitted, he said, we agree on a lot of things, but there's a couple of things we just don't agree on. So, nothing came out of it. And I don't think anything good can reasonably be expected to come out of such a summit. Maybe some unpredictable and even invisible to the outside world constellation of forces is going to make this different. I don't know. But you can't build your perspective on that. And so we will see as the weeks go on. We'll see exactly what happens. And that's about all the time we have. We hope you have a great week. And we hope to see you back here on Friday for another episode of Politics by Jake. God willing, I'll be here and you'll be here and we'll do that. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Hi, this is Jake with Politics by Jake to tell you you're not crazy. The system is rigged. Help us say it louder, won't you? Join us at patreon.com/politicsbyjake.